Hello, my beautiful sisters. Welcome to another episode at Minding Her Business podcast. I'm your show host and coach, Jaslyn Martin, and I empower women to read, feed their souls, and succeed in business. Today, I'm extremely happy to present Natalie Brite. She is literally bright like a sunshine, and she is an intuitive business activation and life alignment coach, speaker, artist, and writer, and host of the new Wildly Aligned podcast and blog. She's a catalyst for creative expression and a guide for discovering your gifts so that you can become a deliberate creator of your life, live your truth, and activate your limitless potential. So Natalie, please come on, say hi to everyone, and also tell us a little bit about yourself so people can really be like, oh my God, yes, like I am too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here. Super excited to chat with your audience. So obviously, I'm Natalie Brite, and so I reside currently out of Ohio, and I've been kind of doing this online business thing for coming up on this year will mark my 6 years of being full-time online business. It's definitely been something I always kind of say I stumbled into entrepreneurship. I never kind of went into it thinking I would ever do anything like what I'm doing today. So it's definitely been like a full-blown kind of surrender and just be guided into this entire process of becoming my own boss and building businesses online. So I basically just kind of stumbled into it from first and foremost watching other people online, like build businesses and kind of watching the rise and the boom of online entrepreneurship. And I was actually a client of somebody else that was running an online business, and that's kind of how I got exposed to this entire world. So it's pretty powerful what the online spaces can do for planting seeds of like hope and vision and opportunity for other people, because that's completely how it was for me. So that's basically a little bit about how I got going with working online.
Wow, 6 years ago, I didn't even know life coaching existed. So that's crazy to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even really know it at all either. And I never even like went into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to be like a conscious business coach or like a life alignment coach. It was definitely something that just morphed over time. Like I started off first and foremost focusing completely on life coaching, completely on kind of like well-being coaching. I didn't really have any plan on landing into the type of field that I'm in now or doing the kind of work that I do now, but it definitely kind of just took me where it needed to take me for me to be able to do what I'm doing today.
That's amazing. And honestly, I started around the same area. I did not think I was going to be doing what I do now. And I was going to focus more on like life coaching and like how to get your dream relationship and all this other stuff. That did not work out that way. So I feel you. I think that's most people's.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny because we tend to get really, really like attached to the outcome of, having this clarity around like what we do and how it's going to unfold and what it's going to transpire to be, but it's always going to change. And it takes a lot of like surrendering and just knowing that like, as you change, your business is going to change, and that's okay,
Yeah, that's more than okay. I remember in the beginning, I did so many workbooks and worksheets and like all the papers where you see writers like crunching it up and throwing it behind them. That was me trying to figure out my ideal client and my business name and all this stuff that just like, it didn't even matter.
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful lesson right there in itself of like, not getting so attached to, your specifics with like a specific niche and a specific name and a specific this and that, because it'll actually kind of flow in and come to you when you stop trying to control and force it all.
So you mentioned flow and come to you, and I know you're all about alignment, and actually my newest course right now is called Aligned Action Academy, so this is perfect. I don't know if you knew that, so yes.
That's awesome.
Thanks. So I know that our main topic for the day, and we're going to like scooch into this a little bit, is about masculine and feminine energy within your business. Now, as a woman, I am very more in the masculine side on average. And now that I have like a hubby that we both work from home, we both are entrepreneurs, it's a little difficult to like be cutie wooty with him and also be my masculine energy for business work. So I'd love to talk about that and how you balance the two, because I know you also have an amazing person that you live with. So I would love to talk a little bit about that before we get started too.
Yes, yes. And it's so funny because I'm actually the same way. I've always been very much in my masculine, very disconnected to my feminine. And really in kind of like, I totally pull in the grind and the hustle and really just like force everything. That's how I built the first 2 years of my business, was completely in the masculine, completely hustle and grind. And I went full time in my business, I think a year into building. And so like it served me, it got me results, but at what cost? And so it was kind of like a couple years in was when I started really, I needed to next level, first of all, like definitely was ready to like expand and really step more deeply into my signature gifts and what I offer that's unique. And the one thing that I came to realize is like, I don't want to build a business if it's at the cost of my sanity, my health, my relationships, my happiness, my ability to live my life now the way I want to. And what's wild is like a lot of times, especially entrepreneurship, we have this like vision painted of like live the freedom lifestyle, travel, do all this stuff. But we forget that like we can live in freedom and we can live in joy and abundance in so many different ways now while we're building our businesses. And so that's when I started really adopting the feminine energy and really calling in my sacred feminine and allowing it to activate and rise so that I could start like entering into alignment now. And when I did that, like everything started shifting. My results started happening so much more rapidly. Things became so much more easier. And I loved life and I loved business way more. So it was like this shift of not just functioning completely in the masculine, but allowing myself to like really sink deep into me, into who I am, into like the more sensual, intimate parts of myself, and be very, very present. Brought in this like new aspect of magnetism and power in me that I had no idea existed. And so now that's very much how I teach and I coach, is very much of like really dancing with the feminine energy and really cultivating and activating it. But then from that space, setting up your masculine systems, your masculine, inspired actions, so that there's like this beautiful alignment. Because in terms of like actualizing your intentions and your goals, it's so potent. Like that formula is so powerful. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I'm still learning it a little bit more every day of how to like allow myself to be feminine, which I feel like a lot of women are in that space of just being so disconnected to their intuition, so disconnected to like their instincts and their natural rhythms and their flows, that learning how to come back into that is such a game changer. And it builds so much like self-trust, self-belief, self-value, self-worth. And I think that's where a lot of times many entrepreneurs are really struggling to see like their worth, their enoughness, their value. So when you bring in that feminine flow and you really start connecting in that way, it changes everything. It's like you gain this whole new sense of your power and your ability and your potential, and you just kind of skyrocket. Yeah. So that's kind of been a little bit of my path with bringing those two concepts in.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. As soon as I've learned how to bring feminine energy into my business, it was definitely a game changer. But I would love to know, for the girls that are listening right now, and I'm pretty sure some girls are going to be freaking out. They're like, okay, I want feminine energy in my business. How do I do that? Right? So can you give me a how? Like, what was if you could go back in time when like that 2-year version of you when you were first starting your business, what tip would you give her to be like, trust me, just do this one thing? And let's see, what the difference is for you.
Right away, I know exactly what it is. Stop listening to everybody else and start listening to yourself, without a doubt. Because I think, especially with the way online business is rapidly transitioning, we are in such a big upheaval and change. So many of the old systems and programs and structures that were kind of like the original foundation to which was taught on how to build business, it's changing. It's very different now because we're different as human beings. And so a lot of the old program mentality, like a perfect example is like the niching, like niche down and do this and that. A lot of that concept is actually no longer working the way it once did. And so it's kind of like thinking about it from the space of when we're getting ready to expand into new levels, we know we need to change in order to kind of be able to meet that new level. Business is the same way. And so a lot of the old programs and paradigms of business are so different now that I think it's very important to cultivate your own guidance, your own way of doing things, and to really sharpen your authentic kind of systems and strategies and methods, because that in itself is going to allow you to start tapping back into your own intuitive guidance, your own inner voice, and you have the answers. Like, you are the best guru out there, the best like answer you've been looking for. And I think a lot of times we get so distracted into seeking external, answers and validation and approval, but it's us who needs to be giving that to ourselves and seeking within. And so, yeah, I would say the number one thing is to start trusting in your own ability to have the answers within you to guide you to the steps forward that are going to create exponential growth.
Yeah, I intend to tell my girls, and all my girls that are going to listen to this, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. I say yak a lot, and that means you always know. I'm all about my little acronyms. So whenever I'm talking to someone, I'm doing a one-on-one coaching call, normally I'll say yak to them, and they're like, oh, sorry. Yeah, I know.
I love that. Well, and it's so true because it's very easy to get caught up into that rat race of like feeling like you have to have this like secret sauce or secret formula. Like only a couple people have the answer, and you got to figure out who has the answer so you can get it. And it's like, the reason you see some people thriving and just crushing it is because they figured out their way of getting into that wild alignment and tapping in and finding like their superpowers with it. And it's like remembering no one is you and that is your power, like really leaning into that and then setting up the masculine side of things from the space of that feminine guidance.
That's so true. And for those people that are listening, because I'm pretty sure like me right now, I can't wait to show this to my boyfriend, right? Because I know he definitely needs help with the masculine feminine energy, and it's not just for females, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that's something my husband and I talk a lot about because it's funny, we were just talking about this in my Align and Flow membership because somebody shared a group that they found that was all for men, and it was like basically healing and like personal development for men, and you don't see that often, right? Like that's not very common, of like creating sacred containers for men to do this kind of work, to basically allow them to feel safe to be feminine, and that's something Zach and I talk about a lot, of like the stigmas for males of like, you got to be macho, you got to be on your masculine, like that is the being a man is that way. And it's like, but don't they also deserve to live in flow and live in this space of like presence and deep connection to self, so it is such a, I think, and that's one thing I think that people get kind of nervous about with this masculine and feminine thing is like the definitions we carry around like being masculine, like a masculine person is this, a feminine person is this. And like, even when I say that in my head, I get the image of masculine, tough, strong, a leader, feminine, weak, soft, dainty, right? Like that's like the definition, but that's a very programmed definition. And so it's like allowing us to have permission to see that like that softness of femininity is still powerful and strong and action driven, and vice versa. The masculine can be soft and kind and gentle and flowy. So it's like meshing the two and disrupting the definitions of them that originated.
Mm. And when it comes to, and I think this is beautiful, I just have to say that really quickly. And I'm definitely thinking like before I used to have the same thought where feminine was weak and fragile and, whatever. Now it's more of a, thank God I read enough of like, you are a goddess books that now I see a goddess version of feminine energy where she's rocking some masculine energy in there too. So it's not just the weak, dainty or the opposite, which is like the one that's like super caught up with magazines and all this stuff. Like you don't have to be, you get to be you and still be in masculine and feminine energy. And I think that's beautiful. So thank you.
Yep,
Yes.
exactly.
So we've talked a little bit about masculine and feminine energy, but I would like to talk more about business. So how does it, like, for example, is it better to have business partners where one is more masculine, one is more feminine? Or how do you personally throughout, whenever you're creating something, how do you move from masculine and feminine and know when you need to shift?
Yes. So for me personally, like when I'm looking to like align with collaborations, or like when I went to the beginning of this year, I just revamped and rehired a brand new team. And so like when I was looking to kind of call in collaborations or team members or things like that, I don't really look for like individuals, or I don't feel into individuals that are all pulling one side. Like say they're all masculine or they're more all in the feminine. I look for those who are actually holding really nice space in balance between both, because that's going to help me stay in balance between both of mine. And so for example, like my partner, he's actually very balanced in his masculine and feminine. And what's funny is we have a lot of these conversations about this kind of stuff, and I've actually noticed him bringing out, or I think maybe feeling safe to be more feminine, and things like that. So it's definitely something where I feel like when there is a balance, it helps you stay in balance. But if you're working with somebody, and I've had this experience before, I had somebody I worked with a couple years ago, and they were all in their feminine, to the point where they almost wore it as a wound, like the femininity like really kept them almost wounded of the like inaction, complete inaction. So it actually made me pull even heavier on the masculine to try to compensate for the partnership. And so it threw me more out of balance. So that's why I say, like, I think the partnerships, especially in business, it's really important, or life, right? Like life in general, is to have an open understanding and kind of dialogue between how you're co-creating together, so that you're supporting one another in creating overall balance between both sides. So like one thing I do with my team that I work with now is we're always kind of checking in with each other, where I'll check in with them on how they're feeling, but I'm also going to check in with them on what actions are you doing, and vice versa. They do the same thing with me. So it's like creating that beautiful co-creative environment where you're all supporting each other in creating harmony and balance overall.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. So you're saying when it comes to partnerships, instead of like, for example, I love my hubby. I was about to call him husband. Oh my God. I hope he doesn't hear this podcast right now. So, he gets very into his masculinity, and then like I automatically go into my femininity. Right. And I think that's, that's fair. Right. Also, when we get into angry moments, and I would love to hear your train of thought in this. And I know I'm getting a little bit off business, but I think this is really important for everyone to hear anyways. And I feel called to talk about this. So when you're getting angry, for example, and this happens all the time, when you get told when, you don't get the sales that you wanted, when something happens wrong, you get into your masculinity. It's very hard to get angry and in my femininity. So I've noticed so far, me personally.
Yes.
How do you shift that? How do you go from, okay, I'm obviously in my masculine, to let me get into my femininity? Because it's hard to be like, let me trust myself right now.
Yep. That's where I totally relate, because I think it's like our innate response of like, if something goes wrong, if something's heated, if something's causing stress and anxiety in the body, our body's natural response is fight or flight. So we tend to either fight and bring in the masculine and try to overcompensate, or we try to flight and we try to like pick up the pieces, scramble, and usually we'll go into kind of femininity where we kind of bow back. And so it's really important to understand the body's natural instinctual response. So like our body, when set into a state of stress, is always going to enter into fight or flight. So calling that awareness in and calling in, if you're noticing you're going into that fight mode of what tends to happen a lot, especially with entrepreneurs, is if something goes wrong, you will always notice they'll make one of two choices. If they're not getting the results they want or whatever, they'll either fight, they'll go into all masculine, try to overcompensate, overdo, hustle, grind, push, force, or they'll bow back, they'll go into flight, they'll run away, they'll run hide, they'll cower back, they'll quit, right? And so it's like, if you know that this is the body's natural response to stress, you can start calling in new responses to the stress. And that's where, for me personally, what I do, I call in alignment. The minute something is heated or not going the way I planned or intended, I call in alignment. And for me, like the alignment call in is tapping right back into the present moment. Because in the present moment, if you practice presence, if you practice learning how to be really, really present in your body and really aware, when you're present, the future tripping, the associating with the past, it cannot exist in the present moment. So there you start quieting down the fight or flight, and you start entering into the state of acceptance of the now. And that space of acceptance, you can start responding in much more deliberacy, much more intention, from much more of a balanced state of masculine and feminine. And so I think the key there is really recognizing when you're in that state of fight or flight and calling back in the presence. Great things to do even are things like breath work to call back in presence. Even certain things like focusing on, like if you're noticing that fight or flight, focusing on like removing anything that you're focusing on except for what is literally in front of you right now, like tuning back into connecting to your body, witnessing the objects around you, anything to call back in the present tense moment. You'll start noticing that kind of like stress factor dissipating, and you can start making choices of how do I want to respond from this, rather than that instinctual fight or flight response. You call back the power of deliberate response, and that's where you can do so from the space of feminine, masculine, more intentional responding, if that makes sense.
So I like how you brought this up. And I actually, normally when I talk about freedom, I feel the most free personally when I'm in the present moment. So yeah. So what I do is, and I like how you said that, I normally talk about flight, fight, and freedom. And freedom is being in that present moment. So that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yes, totally.
Now, you mentioned something, and I was going to cut this podcast off soon, but I just can't without asking this question. So you mentioned masculine and feminine energy, but intentionally. Because a lot of us live this life and we just live it without knowing like where we are. And I think it's important, yes, to name like, oh, this is masculine energy. Oh, this is feminine energy. And living in that intentional way. How can we know personally, like, it's not just about if we're in the kitchen, it's feminine energy. No, like, how can we call in every day, every moment of every day? And I guess it's like, you're probably going to say being in the present moment, but how can we call in what we need at that moment?
Yes. Okay. So this is actually so funny. We're talking about this because I just recorded a training on this earlier.
Oh my God.
So there's a couple different ways you can start getting into the space of calling in this balance of masculine and feminine on the day to day. One way that's really easy for a lot of people that are kind of beginners at this, start understanding the moon phases of the monthly moon phases. Because if you start syncing up to the phases of the moon, the main phases throughout the month by default have both masculine and feminine energy in them. So if you know what phase of the moon you're in each week, usually the kind of container of time for each phase is like 3 to 5 days, then you can really understand what kind of energy is going to probably be felt universally. So for example, you'll notice by the end of the month, most people are tired. They need time for reflection. They need time for recharging, kind of like, space to plan for the upcoming month. beginning of the month, everybody's in go mode. Everybody's ready to take action. They're inspired. They've set new goals and intentions for the month. That is literally how the moon phases energetically are. So if you start learning how to work with the moon phases, that's a really easy, tangible way to start kind of getting yourself synced back up with your natural rhythms. But when it comes to the day-to-day of just tapping in and creating awareness, honestly, the best thing you can do is to start allowing yourself to be more aware of your emotional state, your daily state of being. So basically, just aware of, how am I feeling in this moment? How do I want to feel in this moment? What is causing me to feel this way in the moment? The emotional guidance system that we're given is literally there for a very specific reason. And it's going to always calibrate us back into alignment and into balance. But we tend to shut off our emotions, or we pick and choose what emotions are quote unquote good versus not good. You know, like you should be high vibe all the time, but let's be real, we're not high vibe all the time. You know, like certain things like that, of like allowing yourself to witness your feelings and your state of being. Because for example, if you're in a state of being of, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted, you probably need to sink into feminine energy and rest and go within, do some inner work. If you're noticing, I am motivated, I am lit up, I am energized, I am inspired, I have so many ideas, you're probably a masculine, and it's time to like enter into that inspired action and get out there and do stuff, you know? So it's like your guidance system is always trying to keep you in perfect harmony with balancing masculine and feminine. But we have to allow ourselves to feel all the feels so that we can be guided to stay and not judge the feels. Like there are plenty of days where I'm like, I feel like crap. I do not want to do anything. I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the headspace. I'm going to allow myself to be there, and I'm going to sink into femininity. I'm going to sink into creativity, doing stuff just to create. I'm going to sink into, you know, playfulness and just giving myself what I need. Whereas other days I'm the opposite, you know, so it's like giving yourself permission to feel and be guided by those feelings.
And a lot of times whenever I get into those modes of my feminine energy and it's time to create, normally I'll create. And then suddenly that little thing that I had a breakdown with 2 days ago, I'll come up with like an epiphany.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a good point, because a lot of times we resist those breakdowns of like, this is bad, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But the thing is, those breakdowns, if we embrace them, lean into them, allow them to be there, they're probably showing us something that needs to kind of be worked through and felt through and moved through to create the expansion we want. Like the breakdown always precedes the breakthrough, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say when you're in a breakdown, you're 3 steps away from a breakthrough. And
yep.
Yes. So Natalie, I'm extremely happy with this podcast. And I'd like to ask you before I close it off, is there anything else that you feel like we definitely should talk about this, like you feel called to?
I think we hit everything that's super important, especially for like somebody that's just kind of diving into this. And I think the main thing, I'll leave you with this, like if you're not sure if you're out of balance with masculine and feminine, or you're not sure if you need to be focusing on this or working on this kind of stuff, simply like tune into how easy does it feel to create and manifest what you desire. Because if you're feeling forceful, if you're feeling exhausted, burnout, kind of like, you know, like your hamster spinning on a wheel or just throwing spaghetti at a wall, hoping something sticks, chances are you're out of balance. So it's like just allowing yourself to tune in, because we are made to like just be in a state of flow and ease. Obviously, we still are going to have to challenge ourselves, push comfort zones, face discomfort, things like that. But we're supposed to be here like flowing with ease and joy and fulfillment. So if you're not feeling that in the now, this is definitely something that can help you shift into that.
Yes, perfect. And I'd like to add a tip that I personally do so I can get into my femininity and also focus on like, where am I? Am I in fight mode? Am I in flight mode? Am I in free mode? Am I in the past, present, or future? What I normally do is I put in 3 alarm clocks per day just randomly. I'll pick it like a few weeks ahead of time. And what will happen is it'll remind me to be here now. It'll literally say, be here now. And I'll ask myself, where was I living before this alarm clock? Was I living in the past? Was I regretting something? Was I thinking about a memory? Was I daydreaming in the future? Was I worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet? Or was I totally in the moment, fully, like all senses? And that has allowed me to practice even without the alarm clock more often and focus on that freedom lifestyle a lot easier.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I do the same thing. Like I have a million alarms that whenever I'm noticing I'm in like a lot of resistance, I'm like, it's time to use my alarms again to pull me back in. Yeah,
yes.
That's a great tip.
I'm so glad. I actually have never met somebody else that does that. So I'm happy to have said it.
Yeah. Yep. I'm all about like any sort of reinforcements or like reminders, because otherwise it is nearly impossible to keep yourself in that space of awareness.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's really important. I always say step one is always awareness, knowing where you are right here, right now, knowing like it's okay. You don't have to be 50-50 masculine, feminine. You know, I also don't recommend you be 100-0, but find a middle ground that works for you. Not everyone needs to be 50-50. I'm very happy being 60% feminine and 40% masculine.
Right. Well, and that's such a good point because obviously like we all have kind of like a dominant energy that we really thrive in. So it's important to also like really learn and lean into what is your dominant energy so that you can really harness that.
Mm-hmm. And realizing that you don't have to be what anybody else is. Again, comparing yourself, the first tip that Natalie gave, right? So it's always about making sure that whatever you feel is comfortable. Like if you feel 80-20 is comfortable for you, do that. Like don't worry about 50-50. You don't have to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. I'm very happy with this podcast. Natalie, before we leave, I'd like to ask, how does someone that's like, oh my God, I love Natalie and I want to get to know her more, how do they get to know you more? What do you recommend?
Yeah. Well, you can just check out my website. It's at nataliebritecoaching.com. Otherwise, I am very active on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is I am Natalie Brite. And beyond that, I run a private membership community on Facebook as well as a public Facebook community. So both of those are all accessible on my website.
All right, perfect. And for anyone that's listening, I'm sure you got to see her name on the podcast, but her last name is Brite. I know it's like, I think of bright as the sunny, but Brite. So enjoy that. And I will also make sure to put that website that you added into the description. With that said, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you have a beautiful day and make sure to check out some other podcasts and even Wildly Aligned podcasts while you're at it. Bye.